I got a job as a security guard at a remote shopping mall. These rules are easier said than done. Part 2. Just when I finished throwing up into the rubbish bin, I started to think rationally and grew worried for Andy. Was what I had seen on the camera just an elaborate prank on the new guy? I asked myself. It seemed way too real. The blood, the screams, the entity itself. I needed to get to the entrance of the mall and see what was happening. Just then, my eyes fell on the curse rule sheet again, and my eyes fell on the very first rule. Do not exit the security room unless it is time for your routine check. I fought an internal battle within myself. The rational part of me told me that it was all just a prank. The instinctual and primitive part of me told me that something was seriously wrong here, and I had to follow the rules for my own safety. The distinct ring of the desk phone interrupted my conflicting thoughts. I picked the phone up. Hey listen man, this is Andy. I can see this figure in the distance, dude. Could you check the car park cameras? I looked up at the car park cameras and saw nothing. Andy, are you okay? Oh shit. Richard, get out of here. I heard a low growl and the scream of Andy before the call cut off. I started hyperventilating. Somehow camera 9 showed me the future and Andy was being eaten at the very moment. If this was a prank, it was a sick, disgusting one. This had gone too far. My gut feeling deep down told me to just follow the rules and come out of this mall alive. And so, for once in this entire week, I decided to listen to my gut instinct. I scanned the list of rules again and again until my watch let out a small beep. It was the hourly chime feature on my watch. I quickly realized I needed to do my first round of the mall. It was 12 a.m. I slowly opened the door of the security room, half expecting to get jumped by the same alien that ate Andy. I walked out into the dimly lit mall. The mall felt like a medieval castle at this point. Except medieval castles were made of mostly hallways and corridors. Here the mall was just a vast open space. I'll try to give you guys a better description to really help you visualize the mall. Alright, let's start from the entrance. You have an average-sized parking lot at the front first. Walk through the parking, and you get to the front entrance, which is basically just a big glass double door that can be closed at night. Go inside and you will find yourself in I wouldn't call it a hallway, because it's a pretty wide space. Continue walking through the hallway and you get to the main square. The main square is basically a vast area. Shops line the edges of the main square while the middle occupies the big spiral staircase leading up to the second story. There are also old elevators that lead to the second story. The lighting is terrible for a shopping mall and most places are poorly lit. I guess if the shop lights were on, the main square would definitely be brighter. Otherwise the square was drowned in shadows and darkness. It's a darkness in which you can still see, but you may mistake something for another thing. It's the type of darkness that makes you feel like some monster is right behind you. It's the unnerving type of darkness. It's the type of darkness in your closet when you mistake your coat for an unwelcome home intruder. While you can still see the coat in the darkness, that darkness masks it and makes it look like something else. That's the kind of darkness I'm talking about. Climb up the staircase and you get to the second floor. The second floor is an exact replica of the main square along with the same lighting issues. The middle, however, is cut out and you can actually overlook most of the main square along with the entrance if you lean over the edge. My security room is quite discreet. You have to go to the right of the second story and you'll find a discreet door in the corner leading to my security room via another flight of stairs. I can also access the security room from the first floor through the same flight of stairs. The roof of the mall is basically just an open glass canopy. I assume the mall would look great during the day, but at night it's a creepy place. I hope I haven't confused you too much with the description and you got a somewhat clear picture in your head. Now imagine taking a stroll around this mall at 12 a.m., that's exactly what I was doing. So I walked out of the only place that I deemed safe in the entire mall, the security room. As I stepped out into the barren mall, chills ran up my spine. I crossed my arms and hugged myself thinking I was just cold. The air was cool and empty here. My eyes slowly adjusted to the new dimly lit conditions and I started walking around the second story first, just staring into each store. I jumped at every shadow and sound. As I walked past one of the stores, I heard a loud crash. It made me jump back as my heart started pounding violently in my chest. My veins were full of adrenaline and I swear I could have beat the world's fastest athletes then. I looked directly in the direction of the sound and noticed that some items had just fallen over. I sighed in relief and dismissed the incident when a thought suddenly blossomed in my already panic-stricken mind. Why did the items fall over just as I was near them? Is this just a coincidence? I asked myself. Countless thrillers and horror movies I had watched came up in my mind and I suddenly thought a serial killer was out there lurking to get me. It was way worse than that. My ears picked up a faint crying sound from the store and I immediately looked over. A ghostly white tall woman emerged from the rows. I was frozen in fear. She was extremely tall. Her eyes lacked pupils and wore a milky white color. She had a round mouth lined with blood-stained razor-sharp teeth. The rest of her face was pale and flawless. She didn't seem to have a nose. Her dirty black hair hung at either side and she seemed to be wearing some sort of gown. Every single one of my muscles were frozen and my heart nearly popped out of my chest in each beat. My vision swam. I tried to scream but my voice caught up in my throat. Every single cell in my body screamed for me to run away but my muscles were locked. The creepy woman then pulled out a knife from her abdomen and started charging at me. That caused me to snap awake quickly. I ran so fast my teacher would have shed tears of joy. I felt her putrid breath on my neck but I didn't dare turn back. I ran into the security room and slammed the door shut. I locked it. Crimson blood oozed out from the gap under the door slowly. I screamed and jumped right back. Suddenly, I heard the regular ring of the desk phone. I picked it up. "Hey, this is the police, we received an emergency call from this location." Yes, please come, I need help." Then the person on the other line said the following in such a malicious and demonic voice, that shivers ran down my spine. "It isn't that easy to get out of here." Then suddenly my ear felt wet. I pulled the receiver away to see that a thin cold black hand had somehow come out of it. The hand looked like it had been severely burned. It suddenly moved forward and extended further. Its sharp claws clawed at my ear. I lost a bit of my ear and felt an intense sting and pain in the area. I threw the receiver away as my vision blurred with the tears in my eyes. The hand retreated back into the receiver with a bit of my ear it took. Suddenly I heard the high-pitched beep again, what the cats do when we're not home. So for context, me and my husband, Gideon, live in the Bronx, with our two rescue cats, Mr. Watson and Disco Biscuit. Since I have classes and he has work, the cats have the house to themselves throughout the day. Occasionally, they go on small adventures throughout the borough, usually coming back around 9, with a dead rat as a souvenir, but for the most part, they stay in the house. Some point in March, Gideon had the idea to buy those little cat cams that you strap onto your cat's collar so you can see what they do when you're not home, basically, a feline GoPro. I was interested, and he found one for $15 on Wish, so he ordered it. Lo and behold, about 12 weeks later, the cams arrived. Thanks, free shipping from China. We knew we'd be out of the borough all day, so we figured it was as good of a time as any to strap on the cameras before we left. When we got back, we discovered that, as it turned out, neither bothered to leave the house that day, which made waiting for the cameras, and the SD cards they contained, much easier. We plugged discos into Gideon's computer, sat down on the couch, and started watching. We skipped around for the first 3 or so hours, in which nothing happens, in a matter of minutes. At around noon, it gets weird. In the video, at 12:15, Disco is staring at the fridge eagerly. Watson is next to him, and they're drilling at each other. They sit there silently for about 2 minutes, until the door opens. Inside of the fridge sits a girl with her knees to her chin, holding the door open with her hand. She has thick dreads, shorts, a pink hoodie, and sandals. I doubt she's more than 17. But when she sees the kitties, she smiles, a big white holy shit it's a cat smile. She says something inaudible, still grinning, and the cats climb into the fridge with her. She shuts the door again. Even though the cameras are now inches away from her face, her voice is still whispers. The thrum of the fridge makes it indecipherable. She begins to pet them. Disco purrs. The view from his camera becomes obscured as he nuzzles into her hoodie. After a few minutes of this, the girl stops whispering, indecipherable or not. A few minutes after that, Watson trills at Disco, and he looks up to see that the girl no longer has a head. With her free, non-cat petting hand, she presses a finger to where her mouth would be. She scratches Watson and Disco. Watson purrs. Disco does not, then opens the door. They both jump out. The rest of the footage, until the noise of the door swinging open and letting in me and Gideon, is simply Disco in a sunbeam, presumably napping. His camera records Watson sitting on the couch, his eyes closed. When the cops came a few hours ago to get the headless body out of our fridge, it was estimated she had been dead for about 3 weeks. Some of her nails were scattered around the bottom of our fridge, her legs and arms were bloated and puffy, her brown skin was a matisse of red and green from decomposition, plus blue from having frozen to death. The fridge had stopped the smell, but the visuals were left perfectly intact. About an hour ago, the girl's head was found 2 apartments down, in the freezer of an elderly Cuban woman that Disco was known to visit on his expeditions. She was in hysterics. Her English is poor, but she managed to say that she had never seen the girl in her life. Since all 3 of us were witnesses, I got to hug her on the way to the station. Once we got back, Gideon threw the cat cams out of the window. Disco Biscuit seems to know something's wrong, and is in bed, giving us cuddles. But Mr. Watson stays at the fridge, staring, meowing, tail flicking in curiosity. A few minutes ago, I even heard him scratching, something he's always known to keep on the scratch post. I know it's just my jumpy nerves, but I'm convinced that I keep hearing the fridge door swing open.